Hey folks, Evil DM here, back with another episode of Batman the Role-Playing Game, DC Heroes Learning the System. This time, I'm going to be talking about special combat situations in the Batman Role-Playing Game book. If you're new here, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the videos, and share the videos so people know how wonderful the Batman Role-Playing Game and DC Heroes in a whole is good. Anyway, flip to page 41 of the Batman role-playing game book, and we have some things on here called special combat situations. We have weapons, how they're used in combat, surprise, blindside, falling, explosions, throwing things, and then finally the Universal Modifier Chart. The weapons in combat basically is just a summary to let you know that heroes don't use killing combat, and any weapon they should use, they should designate as a non-lethal weapon. When you use the weapon, your AV, EV will be most likely going to be the character stats versus the weapon stats. Some weapons do have their own AV, EV, but a lot of them don't. If they don't, you'll be using things like strength and dexterity, depending on what the weapon is. If you're throwing something, you're going to be using strength as the AV because you have to see how strong you are to throw it. And the dex would be your effective value, how effectively you do throw it at that target to gain damage from your strength. So, yeah, but most weapons in combat should be non-killing, though it kind of makes me wonder how people use blades and things like that to fight when those things are considered deadly. So I'm guessing that when you're playing it as a character, you're designated every shot you're not going to kill somebody. So I guess you can cut someone up and it's not really considered deadly, depending on the game you're playing. But yeah. So surprise, just as it says, when a character is caught off guard but not in combat. So this is kind of like an ambush. For this to work, a perception check needs to be done. See my previous video, I just did that about perception. For the ambush itself, it would be the character who's being ambushed, his intelligence as the AV or the action value, and his will as the effective value, versus the character is intelligence for the opposing value versus his will for the resistance value. Positive wraps mean you discover a clue about the ambush and it doesn't go off. No wraps mean the ambush does go off. If you are surprised, you may not take any actions during the first phase of combat, and all surprised characters have a -2 column shift on the action table that phase. Pretty simple. Generally, that's how surprise works. You don't get to act, and you get some type of negative modifier on you. If it's D&D, you usually get some type of flat foot, don't get your dexterity, and you can't act. So I'm just trying to compare it to something some other people know. Blindside. Okay, think of blindside as like a backstab or a sneak attack or coming from you out of nowhere, Randy Orton, RKO out of nowhere. It's really, this one is kind of up in the air for the GM. It's kind of a fiat thing. They have to decide what's logical as far as a backstab or a sneak attack or out of nowhere. When he does, the defender is at -1 OV for all their attacks versus this person until they can get them in their line of vision or discover with any power or skill where they are. So I guess blindside would be considered blind fighting as well. So falling. This one's kind of interesting. Anything over 0 AP, which is 10 feet of distance, becomes killing damage. Take the distance that the character falls in AP. Remember that benchmark chart I showed you in an earlier video in the beginning of this book to judge how far feet. Translate the feet into APs, and then you multiply it by 2, using it as the AV and the EV versus the character's body for both OV and RV. Positive wraps are subtracted from the character's body score. Note, in the Batman role-playing game, the falling damage can only go as high as 7 APs or 14 total because you're multiplying it by 2. So you can fall further than 14 APs, but the damage limit will stop after then. Then you'd have to actually use 2nd edition because the book doesn't really go that high. Well, at least they don't allow you to. You can do whatever you want. It's your game. Now, explosions. Their area of effect, and they will do full damage to all the targets within the 10-foot 0 AP radius. For every 10 feet or so after that, or AP minus 1 AP from it, you take 1 AP from the effective value of the center of the circle, and that's the damage that those people take. So if the effective value is a 6, the next group takes a 5, then a 4, then a 3, then a 2, and then a 1 until nothing. So that's how explosions work in the situation. The radius, and as it radiates out, lesser damage. Makes sense. Then it goes into throwing things, which we did discuss a little bit, but the AV is the thrower's dexterity, the EV is the strength. The distance you can throw, which I did not talk about, is strength minus the object's weight in AP equals the distance that you can throw something. So if your strength is 6 and the object is a 4, you'll be throwing at a 2 AP distance. Pretty simple. If GM fiat on throwing weapons, as far as if I lift up a car and I throw a car at you, yeah, you're going to get the damage from my dex and my strength, but is there going to be additional damage because of the car? Absolutely. Now it's up to the GM to figure that part out, and the book doesn't really go into it. That does go over things in such... It goes a little bit more detail in the later editions, but for this edition, they say GM fiat. You figure it out. No big deal. And finally, the last thing we're going to talk about here is this Universal Modifier table. So if you don't know what to roll or you don't know how to modify the situation, this is where you're supposed to look. There are some automatic actions that you can take, like running, obviously, because you don't need to roll for running, but you do need to roll for running if you're running over a slick surface, or if you need to drive a car down the street. Obviously, that's an automatic action. You don't need to do it. But if you're driving a car down the street while chasing someone, and then someone's chasing you while firing upon your tires, that might be a little bit of a challenge. Well, here's where you look. If the situation you have at hand needs a dice modification modifier, okay, you can check here. This will tell you how many modifier columns you need to do as far as getting it done. If the action needs something, that's something that's automatic that needs a roll, but you can't figure it out, you just look here. It'll give you the OVRV regardless of what the OVRV is. So if my character's running across ice, obviously that's going to be probably a little bit challenging or difficult because it's ice. Or it might be strenuous, who knows, because I've never run across ice depending on where my character's from. Maybe I've never seen ice because I live in Florida. You don't really see ice in southern states that often. You kind of do. But let's just say you're running across the ice to get to a villain that's running away. I'm going to have you roll versus your dexterity to see if you're going to slip and slide out of there. Maybe I'll tell you it's a 6. Maybe I won't tell you. I'll make you just roll. But this is what this chart is for. I don't particularly like this chart, except for this section right here of the automatic actions. The dice modifier, I don't know. I know it's supposed to be column shifts, but I guess you could use it that way. I don't know. Tell me what you think about this. Do you use any of these things? I know these are special combat situations, and it really goes into a little bit depth of how things work. Leave a comment below, like the video, share the video, and if you are new here, please subscribe and tell your friends all about it. With that said, keep it original, keep it old school, and good night, everybody.